So the second part of class this afternoon is looking at our landscape assignment that is due this afternoon. I hope you've shot already, in which case I'd like you to do some additional editing work and make sure that you've really honed down those images and got them the best you could possibly have them. If you haven't shot, then get out on campus, go down to the lake, go into the woods. There may be a tumble down building somewhere that you can photograph, get some close-up shots, get some wide views as well, and get something, even if it's a placeholder, and you're going to go back and shoot additional work. At least you'll have something to deliver this afternoon. The assignment sheet, rule of thirds, thinking about the division point between the foreground and the background, or the different tonalities within the image. Number two, foreground, background, and a place to stand. And the image that we're looking at here has a division of the thirds, but also this walkway here inviting us to come and stand. It gives us a place to stand within the image. A central point of interest, structure in the random, and one of the other images that we're going to look at of moving water, seeing whether there's structure in that area. So, take a picture of the assignment sheet, have that with you on your phone, or have it with you so that you can reference it. In terms of delivery, standard 12 images are required for this assignment, contact sheet, and one image to the server, all of your images, full res, and the contact sheet, one print and a contact sheet for delivery this afternoon, and Blackboard, one image and one contact sheet there. So this image here has had a good deal of work on it, and if we go to Bridge, this is where we started with this shot. The other image I want to look at quickly is this of moving water, and in black and white it simplifies the image, but with dodge and burn and blending, we can end up with something that's a lot more interesting than the start image. So let's start here first of all with this shot. I'm going to pull it into Photoshop. First thing, the horizon line is not quite straight, and using the ruler tool is a great kind of built-in. If I click at one point and bring it to the other point on the horizon, that's going to lock into our image rotation tool. Drop down menu, image rotation, and if we go to the arbitrary setting, we'll be able to see that it's already locked in 1.2 degrees clockwise, and that's going to straighten my image out. So that's an easy fix with the image there. At this point, I'm going to duplicate the layer, drop down menu, layer, and duplicate layer, and hit OK. And if I go to the layer palette, we can see both of those images here. This is where I want to drop that horizon line down so that it ends up looking like clouds in the mountains kind of look. In order to see what I'm doing, I'm going to drop the opacity down to about 20%, and then with the move tool, I can move that top layer and you can see where it blends underneath. And so, yeah, let's move that into that kind of location there. I'm going to put the opacity back and then add a layer mask to the top layer. This should be a familiar technique. Choose a brush, and let's get that out of the way at this point. I'm going to set the opacity and the flow to 100% so that I can quickly clean up the sky, and then we'll do a more delicate blending in just a minute as well. I feel a little bit like Bob Ross doing this. There we go. Let's go underneath here as well. And a little bit of fine tuning on this, so we drop down the opacity and the flow in order to do that. So I'm not going to labor this too much, and you probably need to spend a bit more time on getting this part, if you're doing this kind of technique, working on this to get this kind of right. So it's not perfect, but at least it gets us going. I'm going to flatten the image, drop down menu, image, layer, and flatten the image. So we should only have one layer again now if we look on the layer palette. And at this point I'm going to crop the image using the rectangular marquee tool. And so I designate my area that I want to be cropped. And then drop down menu, image, crop, and that will crop the image. So this is where we are now. I want the sky to have a lot more contrast. I want the foreground to be a lot brighter. So again, I'm going to duplicate the layer, duplicate. Okay. I'm going to start working on the background and make the sky a lot more dramatic first of all, just using curves. So image adjustments and curves. Let me see, let's just add a lot more contrast in the sky there. I'm going to redo that. And this time working on the top layer, and I'm going to make the foreground much lighter. Just thinking about the foreground part of the image. Actually, I quite like the contrast on that, so I'll leave that there. And a layer mask again. This is so that I can paint in the background image and get the darker sky. Let's not be quite so aggressive on the parts there. So we can start blending this image and we're getting closer to what we want our final image to look like. So we're getting there. It's not quite there yet. And this kind of skyline here, I think, is a little rough, but I just want to keep moving with this right now to get the image and the technique, so that you got some ideas of what you can do there. I'm going to flatten the layer again, layer and flatten, and take out the houses because I find them a bit distracting. Using the patch tool for that. Get rid of this one too. Yeah, it's looking a little rough and not as kind of neat as the previous version, but the technique is pretty much there. I did some color adjustment on the sky as well on that previous image. Black and white, this can look really dramatic as well. So using the black and white tool, and if you think about the sky, the blue here, if I want to make that appear darker, I can use the blue slider here, and I think that's a pretty cool look as well. So you can choose to do some kind of black and white work on these images as well, if you like. Let's look at this other shot quickly as well. So of the water, I'm just going to open this up in Photoshop and do a couple of things here. The idea is we want the viewer's eye to be drawn to the lighter areas, but I want to be in control of that. And at the moment in this shot, this rock here, this rusty color rock is quite dominant, and even the green areas are pulling the eye, although I think more pleasing to look at. I'm going to, let me see, use the lasso tool. I've got the pixels, actually I'm going to change that to 400 pixels on this size of image, and do a very kind of squiggly line around the areas where I think actually I want the viewer's eye to be drawn to those kind of areas. And that's going to smooth out in just a minute. First of all, I'm going to go to the outside. So drop down menu, select, inverse, and you'll see the marching ants on the outside of the image now. If I go to curves again, I can darken down the outside of the image. Curves will allow me to adjust the contrast at the same time. So as I bring it down, there's a tendency for the contrast to increase. So I'm going to flatten that contrast just a fraction on that as well. Okay. this point, I'm going to come back to the inside of the image. So back, drop down menu again, select inverse. And now I'm just working on the inside of that image. Again, curves. And I want to lighten this. I don't want to overdo it. As we lighten an image, there's a tendency for contrast to be increased, but actually I think the contrast is just fine there at the moment. If anything, I'm just going to pull that highlight down just a fraction. Okay. So in terms of a straight dodge and burn, that's kind of fairly straightforward. But this image, I'm going to do a couple of other things. I want to look at a black and white conversion, but I want to look at blending a color and a black and white image together. So to do that, drop down menu, layer, duplicate layer, yes. Go back to the layers palette, and that top layer, I'm going to convert to black and white. So image adjustments, black and white. Get that where I want it to be. And that's looking pretty cool, but what I can do is blend these two images together. And so within the layers tool here, if I go to, there's a lot of blending options here, but soft light is a pretty cool way of doing it. And we can adjust the opacity on the blend of these two images together. And it can give us quite a cool kind of final result. I'm going to save that image, and we can look at the two images side by side again. And oh, I don't want to replace it. Let's go and call that 3. Well, maybe I need to call it 4. So I've been experimenting with this too much. Here we go. So this is where we started. This is the image that we've just created. The black and white version. And that's the previous blended one with a different kind of opacity mix. There's a lot of things that we can do, and I'd really want you to work on getting the best out of the images that you've got. So if you've already shot, if you've already done editing, go back and do additional editing. The one other piece in terms of editing with your images will be sharpening. Try to remember to get that in. So sharpening, unsharp mask is our go-to. 82.2 is our default position that just gives a little bit more edge to the image. So I'm adding that sharpening on, and try to remember to kind of get that sharpening piece sorted out on all of your images at this point. All right. You got a busy rest of the day. Get as much as you can done, and get those landscape images in today. Thanks.